Everyone, Vanakkam, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good evening. Welcome to our AmCham Sri Lanka topic in focus for the month of June 2021. We're topical and timely as we try to be today. We're focusing on the topic of logistics in trade shifts. Are we ready for the shift? To recap on the AmCham Sri Lanka Trade Shifts Initiative, recent events such as the US-China trade war, rising costs of labor, and of course the disruptions caused by COVID-19 have led to companies over the past few years exploring the options of diversifying their manufacturing and supply facilities out of a single country. Companies such as Google, Microsoft, Sony, Apple, amongst others, have moved to India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and others in the Asian region, providing these countries billions of dollars in new export revenues. Now, the value of these trade shifts is estimated at over 150 billion US dollars worth of trade within the next 4 to 5 years. And the potential for Sri Lanka to attract some of this business is, in the words of AmCham Sri Lanka President Prasanta Jayamaha, very real and available. Recognizing this opportunity, we here at AmCham collaborated with the USAID to create and implement a project titled TRADESHIFTS. TRADESHIFTS is a multi-phase project aimed at identifying and attracting the low-hanging fruit for Sri Lanka from this opportunity. Now, today, our expert panelists will share with you an in-depth view of what is the logistics industry in Sri Lanka and is it ready for these shifts? If and what we may need to do if not. So your panelists today, Siddharth Iyer is the country manager for Maersk in Sri Lanka and the Maldives with experience across functions in commercial, operations and general management and across multiple geographies, Belgium, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka and the Maldives. He has been instrumental in driving Maersk's transformation from an ocean-based carrier in the South Asia region into an integrator of container logistics and is a leading voice in the logistics industry. He is the current vice chairman of the Sri Lanka Association of Vessel Operators, and Siddharth is widely regarded as a thought leader at industry forums in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Welcome, Siddharth, to the AmCham panel. Group CEO of EFL Global, Senthil Nathans Shanmugam is an industry veteran and a visionary with a firm belief in technology and R&D. He is also the founder and managing director of EFL India, a believer of digital disruption. Mr. Senthil Nathans strives to infuse technology with human capital to enrich and deliver unparalleled business solutions that transform global commerce. I'm sorry, my throat seems to be kind of closing up. He's also passionate and closely involved in many philanthropic and social projects that hold a strong place in his heart, and he pursues unity and universalism in his downtime. Chandana De Silva, an industry veteran and somewhat maybe our real rose among the thorns here today. Chandana is an aviation industry veteran and represents the extremely important aviation sector in the conversation, that is logistics. Chandana is the country manager of Emirates for Sri Lanka and the Maldives and was the driving force behind all operations related to Sri Lankan Airlines and Emirates collaboration many years ago. Srihara De Silva Jayawardena serves as the group managing director of the McLaren's group of companies, a diversified conglomerate with its core business in shipping and logistics services. She has spearheaded the strategic growth of McLaren's group over the last 15 years, along with internal restructuring, mergers, acquisitions, and new business ventures. She's the founding president of the Women's International Shipping and Trading Association in Sri Lanka, an association which has transformed the landscape of women in shipping. She was invited by the International Chamber of Shipping Board to serve as a panel member in its ICS 6 Strong Advisory Panel on Diversity in Shipping to advise on future policy direction for the industry. And she's also a chartered member of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. Romesh David is the CEO of South Asia Gateway Terminals, Sri Lanka's first PPP project in the port sector by a consortium led by John Keells Holding and including AP Moller Maersk Group, Evergreen of Taiwan, and the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. He was previously with JKH for 38 years, where he had overall responsibility for all business in the transportation group, which included companies in the ports, bunkering, shipping, logistics, freight forwarding, airline, aviation services, and travel sectors. A chartered fellow of the century-old Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, and a past international VP of the Institute, he currently serves as a global advisor to women in transport and logistics. Last but not least, of course, your moderator, Rohan Masakorala. needs little or no introduction to those in the shipping and logistics industries. Rohan is the founder and CEO of the Shippers Academy International, a graduate in economics and business administration from Connecticut State University. He counts over 29 years of experience in the fields of exports, shipping, logistics, warehousing, and supply chain management, with administrative and operational experience in the private and public sector in Sri Lanka, Singapore, and Australia. And I think, given the multiple hats he wears, it's safest to introduce him as his LinkedIn profile says, a futurist, economist, educator, and entrepreneur. Rohan, over to you to take this conversation forward. Rohan, I believe you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Rai. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, the panelists who have joined us. And thank you, MCHAM, for once again reaching out for us to talk about logistics. And I will be partnering you with the TradeShifts program, and obviously happy to be coming on board and educating our people who are joining from Facebook and various other instruments to listen to the logistics story of Sri Lanka. And we have some of the best people who can talk, the seniority, the experience, and knowledge, local and global, in terms of where we stand. So in terms of this whole discussion, as Rai mentioned at the outset, in 2016, we saw a major change around the world with President Trump coming into power in the United States and making hostile, I would say, moves on tariffs, specifically with China. And a game changer was kind of put on all of us to see in uncertainty where the world is going to move forward from here onwards. We can remember the famous Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement was scrapped, and many other agreements were scrapped. Then, of course, the tariffs were increased against China. That led to the Chinese responding, and today, up to now, we have this trade war continuing. Even though we have a new president in the US, the things remain somewhat same. And of course, the COVID-19 situation doubled up this situation of supply chain security, which everybody started to talk about, because we were talking about factory of the world being China, and everybody relied on labor-related benefits and to rely on one nation to make its majority of supplies. So there we stood, and now we see the world is now thinking where to move, where to go, what to do. And in this scenario, we see, as Rai explained at the beginning, we've done a lot of research from our side, from the AmCham, the $150 billion of trade that is going to move or already moved to some countries, which have not yet reached Sri Lanka, I must say, is giving a signal that the investors as well as the manufacturers are looking at certain trade shifts of post-COVID global economy. And that results of this would be probably visible within the next 5 years. So in this background, I think the most appropriate topic is for us as an island nation in the Indian Ocean, in my view, one of the best locations in the world, whether we have done the right thing, whether we are in the right position now, and what the future talks to us as a nation, and specifically on what we have been always talking about, a logistics hub, a maritime hub, our dreams and aspirations as a nation. Can we achieve them? To know some kind of insights into this, I think MCHAM has selected some of the best people today. So once again, panelists, thank you very much for joining, and I'm honored to be your moderator today. And I would start some of this general question of your views on the current situation in the international market, how you read the global shift, and into particularly your particular field of business that we are in. I am sure most of you have some commonalities, but whatever you feel in the first round, before I pose some questions specifically for you, I would like to get each one of your views. So starting with, I think we have one single lady, so to be fair, I thought let's get the lady's first story out. And Shahara, I would love to hear you in briefly how you see and what you have heard from us and how you would interpret to the people who are listening. Thank you. Over to you, Shahara.
Thank you, Rohan. And thank you, AmCham, for inviting me for this panel. Yes, I think we are in the midst of very turbulent times, and 2020 saw global trade dipping for the first time. I think since 2013, it's the first year that global trade fell by 5%, and that is mainly, of course, due to COVID pandemic and the breakdown of manufacturing and the supply chains. And what we are seeing is the second impact, of course, is the US trade war started by Donald Trump. And what we're seeing is the Biden administration is continuing the tariffs that they put on. And what we're seeing is some companies are still choosing to be in China and pay the higher costs of the tariffs. Some companies are more agile and have moved to India, the first country to be able to attract this move. And also countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Indonesia have also, we've seen a lot of shift going to those countries. Sri Lanka, I would not say, even though we don't see it in the numbers, that has been able to attract some of this volume. If you speak to MAS, the largest manufacturer of garments, they would tell you they did get some volume from China, which moved out of China during the last year, during this pandemic time. So that could be more due to the pandemic though. But yes, we don't see a sizable chunk of that business coming into Sri Lanka. However, I think the future will be totally determined by vaccine. This is the vaccine economy. It's the countries that are able to get the vaccine and get their production sorted, and also the vaccine logistics. Countries that are able to ship out the vaccine and have access to it will be the first to get back onto the post-COVID manufacturing levels and trade levels. Sri Lanka, of course, we know where we are with that, but we also have a view that we are aligned to China. So I don't know how companies, US companies who are looking at moving out of China would look at Sri Lanka in a perception, as a perception. Apart from the other things like, you know, the ease of doing business, the regulatory regime, the policy consistency, the legal infrastructure, you know, all the things, the cost of labor, of course, which is the low cost of labor, which is, I think, a key consideration. Approvals process of setting up, all those things will be considerations. So those are things we need to look at. At one point I'd like to end up with is that actually, if you look at Sri Lanka's trade statistics, the first 4 months of 2021, we've actually import and export are the same as 2020. We've not seen volume-wise any increase, but if you look at value-wise, there is an increase, especially in export and import. So if I'm looking at container numbers from the Port of Colombo, I don't see a big change. But in value-wise, yes, we see somewhat of a rebound in 2021. So we are hopeful, and we hope that the governments and the private sector will come together to attract some of this, and especially with the setting up a port city as well. But that's not for manufacturing, but more for services, financial services, that Sri Lanka will be able to attract some of this trade shift that's happening in the world today. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent chat. Good start. Ramesh, you want to jump in from the port here and tell how you look at as a terminal operator and probably the first private sector terminal operator in South Asia. So can you enlighten us of how you see this whole thing?
Thanks, Rohan, and thanks also to AmCham for having me. I think trade shifts will happen, as was sort of quite eloquently put by Rai and Shehara, and that's going to happen. As to whether that is going to benefit Sri Lanka or not, I think is the $1 million question for us. And I think the biggest barrier to us today is not so much the logistics, but the fairly, shall I say, the lack of diversity of what we can offer in terms of being able to make use of those trade shifts, in terms of an export basket, in terms of a human resource capability, in terms of a resource availability. I think that is a fairly large inhibitor that will prove to be difficult. Having said that, I think we also have a great opportunity, and that opportunity has remained unchanged over the last 20 years. We are brilliantly located. If we take, by air, we are within 2 hours of 1/4 of the world's population, and within 5.5 hours of half the world's population. There aren't too many economies and too many economies that are service-led that can talk of that kind of access. We also have the benefit of some really good fundamentals in terms of quality of living, education, availability of young people, which can be key drivers. And I think what is needed is a consistency of policy and that signal out there that we are here for business. And while it will be a trade shift of sorts, I think the real opportunity is as a gateway to this huge mass of consumption as the size of the global economy shifts from the US and Western Europe to more South Asia and the Far East. I think we are brilliantly placed for that, and there's a whole host of things that we need to do. From a port perspective, we have been and remain one of the better performing ports in the world. We are ranked around, I think, 22nd or 23rd by volume, and 14th or 15th in terms of connectivity. So there's no lack of opportunity in terms of connectivity. And I think Chandana will deal with the air connectivity of it, in a pre-COVID and a potentially post-COVID. But from a ocean perspective, we have all the world's shipping lines serving the port, and we have services to literally every continent. So yeah, I think it will happen. I think our opportunity is not so much around this whole perceived trade shift away from China and away from a single source, but also to serve the region, and in terms of what we can do in terms of the proximity to these huge markets around us. Thanks.
Thank you, Romesh. I think you gave a good idea on the port side and connectivity. I think I straight go to Chandana, because Chandana, we're talking of shipping to aviation, and Romesh touched on the gateway nation to this part of the world and the population we are reaching out. How do you see this and our link to trade shifts and cargo handling into Colombo or Hambantota? Just to give a brief of your understanding of this trade shift and how the airline industry would come in a brief, please.
Thanks, Rohan, and Shara and Rai and Romesh. I think he took some of my presentation, so no issues. I think what we need to all need to think about. The first question is, why do they want to come to Sri Lanka for any kind of investment? Why? I mean, that will that's a very broad question, because you have all kinds of things tagging on to that. Romesh mentioned about the ports, and for me, to have the two airports, large airports at the two ends, it's a huge thing. The only thing that our airline survived is because of cargo. So that's a plus point to our country. Another question, what I need to ponder is, we have labor. We say that we do have the human, capacity, but do we have the skilled labor focused towards what we are trying to platform us in the global scenario? So that's something that we should be always thinking. We always say we have cheap value for money labor, but are they skilled labor? So that's another area that we need to ponder. Whilst doing that, in the proximity we have, you said that we have India. Ease of doing business is the main reason that we have an issue. So this is a huge problem that we have. And Pardon me, I think there's a little bit of a low battery scenario that's coming on. Give me 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds. I need to just
Yeah,
hug
sure.
this
Go
thing.
ahead. Yeah, yeah.
My daughter is helping me out, so don't worry. Okay, I can talk, you won't see me. But the other thing is like how I'm struggling with here, the technology. Technology is here. Technology is here for us to what shall I say, use. But the technology has to be integrated. I mean, I have seen, I'm sure either Ramesh or one of you all will be more competent to talk about it. We have seen the technology is there. Customs is online. Nowadays, I think we have seen it lock, stock, and barrel in a bigger way. Your shipping, time to deliver, on-time delivery, those things you can see it on there. So all these things we have to start thinking, and we have to see, instead of working in silos, how do we encompass all these things into one area and work as one team, because those are the things that we can take it forward. And going back to my first input, why would anyone come here? So I will leave that thought with everybody, and then let's move on.
Thank you very much, Vandana. I think I will bring you to the aircraft in the next session when I am asking some related questions. So I'm going to leave the global shipping carrier Maersk for the last slot, but going to Senthil Nathan, who's become a global player for Sri Lanka. And I think, Senthil, you have some slides to be presented, correct?
No, Rohan, I think I can do without the slides, so we can go with the flow. Yeah, so thank you. Thanks, Rohan, and thanks to AmCham for having me on this panel. So to the point of trade shift, I think historically trade shifts have been always there. We have seen that, going back to the 70s when the Japanese manufacturing shifted out of Japan to the rest of the world. Then we have seen an era of pre-WTO situations and the sort of, the quota period of manufacturing, apparel industries, electronic industries, which all had its, they were doing their rounds geographically in terms of sourcing and manufacturing. And then the post-WTO, we saw another change taking place that impacted the global trade and the sourcing and trade. And now, is there a shift? Of course, there is a shift. Definitely, there is a shift. And I think the shift would have happened even faster had this pandemic not been there. So in a way, the shift has sort of pandemic has slowed down the shift. And it is happening as we speak. We see that from our footprint across the Asian countries, particularly in the Far East. So the main beneficiaries of this shift, or the trade war fallout beneficiaries, I think the leading country is Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam has a significant inflow of activity that is going on right now. But we also see countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, where industries, manufacturing almost has died out. Penang, places like Penang are becoming very active. Thailand is emerging with significant ramping up of capacity and production. India is part of that part of that competition. We are clearly seeing this, and also from the the global brand perspective, many large brands who had been sort of on a situation of single country sourcing are shifting to multi-country sourcing. So that means there is a shift that is happening in that sense as well. But from our perspective, to see what is it that we should be doing, or how do we figure this out, and how do we benefit out of this? I think there are a couple of factors. I think we need to put them all into perspective. So one way of looking at is that how are we faring against this competitive landscape, our competition, and in terms of attraction of business, benefiting from this shift. One way of looking at specifically from a logistic point of view is to look at the LPI index, and so where are we? I mean, last index was I think it was 2018 or 19. That's done by World Bank just once in 2 years, but that has a sort of a measurement that includes all the critical components that come together in terms of how we fare. So, in the last index, we were I think about 94. We ranked 94 in that index, and the competing countries in this perspective, like Thailand or Vietnam, Indonesia, India, they were all about 20, 30 notches above us in the 40s. So that shows that we need to do some homework and make sure that we are ready to be part of that beneficiary of that shift. Also, you see, it's about a lot of other factors come in here also, like ramping up capacities. Another key point is the trade agreements, the FTAs. If you look at them, again, we have about 15 or 16 FTAs that are there in place, but our competing environment, like the other countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, all of them have something like, in the scale of 35, 40 trade agreements that are in place. So that's another area to focus on. And I think Romesh touched on this point where we have, the service as a GDP for us, trade as a GDP rather, is in the, it's approximately about 50%. So, but again, most of the, the Far East countries that we spoke about, or India specifically, that's significantly higher. So, so we need to look at all these components, all these areas that ultimately result in us being able to benefit from this shift. And we are good at our human resources, geographical location, all this these are necessary ingredients to build our service aspect of it. The benefit can be manufacturing, and all that is one part of it, but we strategically located in a geography where we could benefit from this is also the value-added services that we can provide as a hub. I mean, if you look at most of small countries around large economies, like they are not actually apple-to-apple comparison, but if you take Hong Kong, for example, or for that matter, Singapore, or countries like Dominican Republic in the US, I think this is in the Americas. These are the factors that work in their favor, and that's what they have been ramping up. And some of them have saturated, like in the case of Singapore, to a great extent by way of cost and other factors. So I think we have a great opportunity here to position ourselves, provided we address all these key factors collectively, and then really ramp up to be there to benefit from this. That's my viewpoint here, Ron.
Okay, thank you very much, Senthil. We'll discuss later on your international experiences, etc. Now I bring in Siddharth from Maersk. Siddharth, tell us, how would Maersk look at Sri Lanka as a trade shift nation that can attract global manufacturers and as a ship hub? What is the overall view, and why hasn't trade probably shifted at this moment towards Sri Lanka? Also, probably you can start from there, so then we can expand the discussion from here on.
Sure, thanks, and giving my perspective, quite a bit of it has already been shared. So, but I would like to start by saying, when we were in April last year, and there were predictions done on what would be the impact of the pandemic, people were saying 25-30% drop in trade. and now we're settling somewhere between 5 or 9%. There are various calculations. And me, I'm an eternal optimist, and therefore I'd say that V-shaped recovery, that the goods and merchandise industry has not really seen that big a decline in spite of the pandemic. In regards to the trade shifts, I say, we've spoken about geopolitics and policies and FTAs, and I won't touch about that, but I came across a very interesting survey that was taken 6 months, was taken before COVID, which said that these would play the biggest role when it came to trade shifts, that people would shift supply chains, would add suppliers, which is a very difficult thing to do. Adding a new origin country, adding a new supplier even is not easy. It costs a lot. It's a big change for big companies, right? And the big reason that at that time was the trade war, was policies. But when you look at it now, the biggest reason by far has been the pandemic. Right. So, while I agree that things may be slow in the short term, but I definitely think that this COVID in the long term will accelerate single sourcing to multi-sourcing. Is it going to change the shipping patterns overnight? No. I mean, is the dependency of China going to move immediately? No. I mean, take retail and apparel, something that's very close to us in our country. Even if you keep taking 1% off, that's enough for Vietnam, that's enough for Cambodia, that's enough for Bangladesh, that's enough for all of us, Africa even. But that still keeps China, on top. The dependency on the import of fabric, you're still dependent on China. So I would say that the whole idea of uncertainty, the VUCA world, as they say, that's the reason why I believe that supply chains will change. They will want more visibility, which means technology is going to be key. The ability to take actions is going to be the most important thing, which people have learned the hard way during this pandemic. And I think, therefore, technology will play a very important role. We also are looking at what's happening in the US. There is now a $6 trillion economy boost that people are talking about. That's going to boost consumption. And if it's going to boost consumption, there is going to be trade. There is going to be goods and merchandise moving out. And there is an opportunity to grab. When it comes to Sri Lanka and our perspective is I think largely, and I think Central touched upon this, and something very close to what we've been driving as well, is that the whole fact that Sri Lanka can position itself to be that hub in this region. It is actually something that we really need to push. We've had a very strong hub act in place. We've had policy. But if you ask me, when you travel internationally, Sri Lanka's ability to be that hub is actually a very well kept and guarded secret. And we need to ask ourselves why that is so. Why is that people know you could do it in Singapore, you could do it in Jebel Ali, but they're quite surprised. Oh, really? This can be done in Colombo. So I think we really need to do that. We need to get supply chains to Sri Lanka, right? Either as a value add or part manufacturing. But unless we get international supply chains into Sri Lanka, international supply chain companies into Sri Lanka, I think it's going to be difficult for us to capitalize, because we are a small country. So consumption is less. Manufacturing, as you said, the scale is limited to, say, apparel at the moment, other than tea and rubber. So we'll have to study supply chains and see that value added product that we can manufacture that will actually help supply chains. And if we can play that role, bring supply chains in here, I think there's a huge opportunity. Despite trade wars and whatever happens, I still think that there is a big opportunity to take an advantage in this scenario.
Thank you, Siddha. Thank you very much. So I think we have a very good first round. So I think I had a general question, which I think all of you have answered. Yes, I was thinking of, okay, trade shifts, yes, it's on the cards to happen. And yes, logistics will play a key role in that supportive trade shifts, one of the components. Obviously, Sri Lanka has, as Siddharth said, it's a hidden hub for the reason. So I would like straight away to go from here. It was a question to Romesh. So if Siddharth sees that there's a hidden hub here, and as a terminal operator in the Port of Colombo, how do you read the current logistics environment in Sri Lanka, vice versa the competition we are facing? That's my first question to you, Romesh.
Thanks, Rohan. So as Sid said, I think it is indeed a well-kept secret, apart from too well-kept, in fact. And I think that we have the people with the power to change it. Some of whom are sitting around the table, people like Senthil, and who have ultimately got to take, Sri Lanka Colombo became a global shipping hub because shipping lines, because of the model, and also the fact that we had a port that worked from going back 30 years when it first started. And the reality is that port has in fits and starts, no doubt, but there has been continuous investment of a scale that was reasonably in keeping with the global norm. You had SAGT 20 years ago, you had CICT 8 years ago, 7 years ago. You will have ECT coming up. And all of these didn't come in the time they should have come. Had they come at the time they should have come, I think even from a shipping perspective, we would have stayed well ahead of the curve. As it is, we are playing catch up now with ECT to come. We are waiting till capacity becomes a crunch before adding capacity. And that really is undesirable from a port perspective. But where we really have failed is the logistics beyond the port gate, and that has been a real challenge. This is despite the fact that governments for the last 40 years, every government, irrespective of political affiliation, has said in their manifestos that they want Sri Lanka to be a global, a regional hub and a logistics and a maritime hub and and to make use of our geographical advantage and so on. But somehow or the other, we have not been able to entice the type of investment that has happened in the port outside the port gate. And unless we do that, and I keep saying this to the point of boredom almost, that we have two glowing examples on either side of us, both locations that had nothing to offer other than the fact that they drove infrastructure, Singapore and Dubai. And that whole driving happened around growth in the port, growth in the airport, and then bridging that logistics gap in between and creating a product. So we have, despite having the same opportunities, we have somehow not been able to convert that to opportunity beyond the gate. We don't have a single global 3PL operator here with a meaningful investment. Why is that? We have global shipping lines here, global terminal operators here, but we don't have a single 3PL operator here. We don't have a single integrator or a single supplier to the region who has seen fit to locate here, despite the fact that we are equidistant to every part of India. And if you look at the most populous regions of India, it is easier to get to those areas from Colombo than it is from any single Indian port. So I think we need to, those are the things that need to get done if we are to transcend from being a good transshipment and shipping hub for full containers into a truly cargo hub, and with all the other bells and whistles that come with it, whether it's having salvos and salvage companies and firefighting companies stationed here because of our location, to having maritime adjudicators and insurance companies and shipping finance companies and crewing companies stationed here. These are all the part and parcel of being a hub. And I think we are just not concentrating enough on taking each of these piece by piece and saying, bang, this is what we do. What do we need to get, the best rescue and salvage company to position here? What do we need to do to get the best, the top 10 legal lawyer, the maritime lawyers, the top 3 crewing companies? What is it that we need to do in order to bring them in here? And I think that needs the type of focused approach that shipping lines and global terminal operators gave to developing the port, obviously with the full support and cognizance of the SLPA. So the SLPA really saw this 20 years ago or 24 years ago. I think we need to have the other agencies do the same thing and private enterprise do the same thing.
Thank you, Ramesh. Chandana, I would like to get on to your side from the aviation perspective, but something interesting I picked up from Shahara was that there is a perception that we are aligned towards China, or perception is being built. What will be the result of this in terms of global aviation looking at Sri Lanka to create itself a hub? Because we need to play with everybody, like Singapore or Hong Kong or Dubai, to be realistically an aviation hub. Do you see a problem there? And do you also see, as Romesh said, since 1978, we liberalized our economy, but we have walked not even half the path. So how do you read it? If you can briefly answer my question.
Yeah, Rohan, I think you're asking the correct questions. However, if you go back, I step back few years, the first thing is you asked a question. I mentioned that the why question is a great thing. Why are people not thinking about Sri Lanka? Number one. Siddharth mentioned, when it comes to logistics and when it comes to this connectivity, we are nowhere in the vicinity. People are not thinking about Sri Lanka. Again, why? We have the port, airport connectivity. We can't work in isolation as Sri Lanka. We have, Romesh mentioned, we have Dubai to about 3.5 to 4 hours away. We have Singapore on the other side. So we can work in tandem with these people, with these countries. So we are absolutely clearly located well. So there is no two words about it. Number one factor is the policy. Do we have a policy in the country to take all these things forward? So what is the next step? I still remember 3 years ago when we were discussing hub concept, air hub concept, people were like thinking, why are we talking about it? We are few years behind time. I don't think that's the right answer. So even now, we have to start. The second input is open skies policy in the country. We have in the aviation, we have a kind of a controlled open skies policy, unlike in many countries. Of course, some may cite US and Canada and places like that also, saying, okay, they do have some control factors. But coming back to your question, Rohan, if any airline could land in Colombo and take their stuff all the way down to China or some place like that. Similarly, like Emirates today positioned to take all your goods and commodities to Dubai. And there goes the fingers all around the world. Africa, Europe, USA, Canada, China, you name it, everywhere. So that's the kind of the connectivity that we must think of for the future. Look at Sri Lanka. I think Sri Lanka, one thing that we have missed out is we started aviation in the 1930s. I think somewhere around the 1970s, the BIA came in. BIA today has a capacity of 250,000 metric tons per annum. And Matale Airport, they do have 45,000 metric tons of our capacity. And in both these places, the large aircraft, the freighters can land. So there's no problem with that. If you take Emirates per se, we used to fly before the pandemic 4 times a day with a belly capacity of 25 tons in any aircraft. And same goes to wide-bodied aircraft of other carriers. One factor that we are forgetting when we are talking the logistic connectivity, we should focus towards high-value stuff, pharma, electronics, microchips, not only the general commodities, we can diversify all these things into various places. One factor that we all have forgotten is we have 14 domestic airports. So connectivity within Sri Lanka is also high. It is just that we are not focused properly. If there are high value things that you need to deliver just in time to catch another flight or to transport from a ship to the aircraft and be transported to Dambulla or maybe to Trincomalee or even to Jaffna or any part of our country, we have 14 aerodromes ready. And no one had thought about it. No one had invested on those things. So it's not an isolated story that we need to only look at the mode of transportation or supply chain as the ground transportation. There are various other factors that we can look at. Now, looking at the bigger picture, to date, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, maybe I'm wrong, please correct me, Rohan, and or any lady or a gentleman here. Have we ever positioned Sri Lanka as a marketable logistical hub? Have we ever done that? I mean, either by any successive government or anybody or private entity or anybody? No. So it is high time that we all pull our socks up and then see how we can market our country and then improve the recall rate. So that top of the mind, you see, okay, why don't we go to Sri Lanka? Yes, we have, where the exports are concerned, I think, Shara, I think you mentioned it, exports are concerned, we have a very small percentage of the global export out of Sri Lanka. However, we do have a high value of cargo going out of Sri Lanka to various parts of the world. So that's a huge one for Sri Lanka. There are places that we can do up. The FTZ, where do we have? We have one in Katunayaka, we have one in Koggala, and I'm not quite sure other places you all have to name it. But why don't we think about Dambulla, like I mentioned before? Why don't we think about Jaffna area? We have so much of land there. Why don't you think about the East Coast area? So there are multiple factors that we can think and mesh them into a great hub and for people to remember Sri Lanka. And the connectivity cannot be in isolation. That has to be in conjunction with the proximity to our country, which is Dubai or maybe even Singapore. They have huge capacities, large capacity or capabilities of handling it. And if I take Emirates, we have 11 freighters running around everywhere, 260 plus aircraft, wide-bodied aircraft again, and that's only one carrier. So imagine all these carriers put together, what we can do. And the two large ports are there, Hambantota, Colombo. Thinking, if the policymakers are thinking, they should be thinking about Trincomalee also. Why not? I mean, it may not happen today, but it should be in the policy paper to think in the future, we need to think about it. So that's the kind of the bigger picture. And those are the points that we should be pondering and then see how best we can position our country in the minds of everybody, and especially US. We need them here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, but I need you to answer the first question what Shara brought in about our alignment to China story, whether it will be a hindrance for US companies to come into Sri Lanka.
I think it could be a yes and a no, because of looking at the historic, what shall I say, the wedge that we have between the two countries, because one country is looking at the other one as pushing their way. US is saying China is pushing their way. China is very quietly, cleverly pushing their way into the country. So answering your question, yes, they may see it as, but then China has set the platform for them to believe in my country, to say that you can do business in my country. I don't know why US can't come in a larger scale to our country. So I would look at it from a point of positivity to see, yes, if they can do, I can do. If China can do, me, US, I can do. So that's the mindset that you and I need to create. And then keep a blank sheet for everybody.
Thank you, Chandana, for your ideas. Shara, to you, now Romesh was talking about why we have not, or how he feels that something is missing here. Also, from your point of view, from a maritime perspective, how do you read the macro maritime environment in this part of the world? Because we see all the headquarters of global shipping lines are in Singapore and Dubai, and also in the regional headquarters of even Maersk is located in India, but not in the so-called fantastic location. How do you read this situation?
Yeah, Rohan, I think I will first start with differentiating the maritime hub from the logistics hub. It's two different focuses each would have. Logistics hub, I completely agree with what Romesh said. Beyond the port gate, we don't have those large companies here which are consolidating cargo, value-adding cargo, and then shipping them out to other destinations. We are not a hub for cargo processing. But if you look about what is right, when you look at maritime services, of course, our port is an established transshipment hub, and that is the strongest point for Sri Lanka's maritime economy, is that we handle about 7 million TEUs of transshipment cargo. Import-export is only less than now 18% of the entire port's volume. So import-export cargo is not what runs the Sri Lankan maritime economy. But apart from that, to be a true maritime hub, it is not only services for cargo, but services for the vessels as well, for ships, may it be bunkering, channeling, lube oil, fresh water, all of these kind of additional services, maybe ship's crew, maybe it's the legal infrastructure to arrest a vessel or dispute resolution. Maybe it's a conducive location for ship owners to register their vessels, a flag of convenience. So there is a whole maritime economy that surrounds being a maritime hub, which, yes, we have a presence of local players, international players which is represented, but there's a long way to go, and I'll come into that when we talk about what we need to do. But to your specific question on the regional headquarters, for Sri Lanka, at the moment, there is no such restriction for any legal, for a headquarter of a shipping company to be here. But what they would look at is ease of transferring funds, ease of doing business, setting up approvals processes. I think all that compared to Singapore and Dubai, we don't have the necessary financial backup for a headquarter operation. And the political instability, policy consistency, that's why I feel this is a golden opportunity we have with the special economic zone created by the port city, which will circumvent a lot of the our prehistoric customs regulations, our legal system, and all of that. And it will be a fast track entry into a lot of companies that want to have purely headquarter operations in Sri Lanka, and not necessarily manufacturing or providing services, but more of an administrative capacity. But coming to even the LPI index, which was mentioned before, and why we are so low on this, is number one is infrastructure. Infrastructure, yes, we have a fantastic port, but we are 5 years late in building that capacity. We missed the bus of East Continent Terminal, and I, representing the customer, will tell you, if we had East Continent Terminal 5 years ago, those customers would have brought in their volume. And purely on capacity crunch, we don't have that volume now. And today there are 5-6 other ports in India who are wooing them. So we are late on that. Yes, but at least there is some movement with that now. But it remains to say how competitive we will be. In adding to that, even though you have the port, the gantry cranes and all of that, if you don't have the necessary IT systems, the efficiency to run that efficiently, and the kind of capacity that can contain will be not sufficient. So we really do need to get that port community system where all the parties in the logistics chain are connected into this and can transact electronically. Customs is another critical party where we still have hard copies handed of the export manifest, manifest correctors. So many documents in the export process is still manually given, even during COVID. There was one time, of course, that they did accept the emails, but then you can't do these kind of transactions on email. You have to have a fully fledged system that will facilitate all the safeguards as well. So I think we are, even through the Shipping Agents Association, is in contact with customs, and we have a priority list that they're working on. So we hopefully we'll be looking at those things. And three other things I'd like to mention is tracking and tracing. That is something that Sri Lanka is fairly good at because the shipping lines have their own systems, so cargo can be tracked and traced. And the other one is the ease of doing a shipment and the timelines. So the exporters and importers can fairly have a good understanding of the times taken for their shipments to be made, and also be able to track them locally and overseas. But really, I would really stress on the ease of doing business and also the infrastructure. Infrastructure not only in ports, but also the infrastructure required for the additional services. Maybe even bunker storage capacity, it might be bonded warehouses, it might be racked distribution centers, whatever it is, that infrastructure, it's open for anybody to invest in, and we are not being able to attract that, unfortunately, with global players at the moment.
Thank you, Shahara. Yeah, so yes, we all agree that we have a gap in infrastructure beyond the port gate and transshipment, and we need to fix it. So there are opportunities for investors to come in also in those areas, and if the policy is right, we can do that. Now, I move on to say Siddharth before I go to Senthil. Siddharth, now Maersk as a shipping line, how do you see yourself beyond the shipping line into logistics? And also I would repose the question, you guys are having your headquarters in Dubai and Singapore, and even the regional headquarters, I would say the doing business is not the best in India compared to Dubai and Singapore. Why aren't they here in Colombo, which is a smaller country with a small area and a largest port probably in the region? Why is your even regional headquarters located in India?
So let me then answer the second one first before I move to the question on where Maersk is. I don't think fundamentally there are a couple of things, and of course there is the regulation and the other things on ownership and other factors that need to be addressed, and this is something that we've been saying for a while. We need to, and it goes back to my earlier point, international supply chains, international companies will all come. If the enablers are set, they will come. Today, we operate our entire operations cluster out of Dubai, not even India. India only has the agency headquarters because India by far is the largest export and import market, and therefore it makes sense for us to be situated there. But let me put it this way, our operational headquarters for this region, which handles the ports of Middle East and Asia, is in Dubai. Now that's something that could be an easy shift. Is actually looking at terminals, it's looking at the maritime marine side of the business, procurement side of the business, cargo execution into the port. And therefore there'll be a lot of interest to shift that in here if the framework, if the regulation, if everything else is in place. So the reason why the headquarters for our region is in India is largely because our biggest customers are there, our business is there. Today we're a small business. I wish we have the headquarters here because I love Sri Lanka and would love to spend the rest of my life here. But there's a big way to go for us to actually achieve that. To go back to your first question, I think Maersk in the last 3 years, even before long before the pandemic itself, we set out on a transformation, and that transformation is basically figuring out that ocean trade had become commoditized, and we need to look at supply chains, right? And we need to look at customers as international supply chains. Today in Sri Lanka, I believe we largely look at, like, the port looks at the lines as their customers. Shipping agents look at forwarders as their customers. But I think if we start looking at these as supply chains, right? What does the pharmaceutical industry need? As what does retail and apparel need? What does automobile need? I think that will actually create a big difference. And I think that's a big change that Maersk has actually gone into. We're no longer structured basis trade. We're no longer structured basis geography. We're looking at verticals. We're looking at customers. We're designing the organization around industry segments, right? And that could be multi-product. We now are from a one-trick pony moving into from ocean carriage. We're moving into air freight, LCL. We're pushing the hub concept. Just to also add to Shahara's bit on the hub, I think a hub is at 4 levels, right? This is how I explain it. One is the vessel level. You need to be a hub. The next is at a container level. You need to be a hub. The next is at a carton level. you need to be a hub, and the next it has a peace level, you need to be a hub. And only if you are able to do all these four will you be able to become a successful hub, because otherwise there are places that offer all of these today, and that even though they're more expensive, business will go there. But I think coming back to the point, I think Maersk is moving into being an integrator. We want to move end to end. We want to be in transportation. We want to be in fulfillment. We also want to be on the technology side, have self-service platforms that customers could use. So we're kind of moving our approach, and it's quite a long-term vision in terms of that transformation that we're actually right in the middle of as we speak. But it's, to put it in a nutshell, keeping customers and segments in the core, and building it around technology. We're moving from systems to platform-based model. We are launching a lot of, if you look at it in Sri Lanka, we've also launched all of our order handling on the ocean side today is digital. You can log on to maerskline.com. We don't have multiple rates for multiple forwarders. Everything is on the system. We've got Twill, which is a digital forwarder for SMEs, and we've got products and services for the larger customers as well. So for us, it's designing around the customers, and technology being the core is what we're actually doing, and that's how the transformation is happening at this stage.
Right, great, thank you. So now coming to Senthil, I think you've given thumbs up. So Senthil seems Maersk is looking from the ship to shore and the logistics whole supply chain as a global leader. They're seeing a transition from a pure global maritime partner to a global supply chain partner. That's what I read from Siddharth. On your side, I think Expo Lanka, the group, has partnered or ventured into a multinational company through investment. How have you seen the changeover? What has happened to you in case as a company? I saw you are coming in within the first 50 air freight index on one of the indexes as a company. How do you see this transition with working with a multinational joint venture and going global, and how do you see Sri Lanka?
Thank you, Rohan. I mean, it's good that there are so many opinions expressed, so I think it's easy for me to pick from most of them. But to the point that in our index, we as EFL, the global index air freight, we are at number 28 now, Rohan, and we are also on the Transpac within the top 25 in the Trans-Pacific route on ocean freight, right? So that's because of our diversity. Our playing field is the world, because we have 26 countries that we are operating on right now. So to the point, Siddharth raised some very valid points there. Two of them I will take, and I will move on to answer your question. One is that Sri Lanka is a well-kept secret. I like that, the way he put it. And also the future, if you take, all the panelists, what we spoke, the future is more collaborative, right? It has to be collaborative. And that's what I see in the supply chain environment that's coming up. And for us, I mean, the fact that we have a very strong parent, the fact that we have, were able to go into this divestment and do all that has, really complemented in the overall growth of us, I mean, EFL and Expo Lanka as a company. But the point that on the softer side of logistics, if I may say, also picking Siddharth's point that, the different level of hubs, and we come into the softer side of the hub. And looking at the environment, I think we need to be, let's put it this way, Ron, we need to be more inviting to all stakeholders. If that collaborative initiative or collaboration has to take place among all the stakeholders, apart from all what we have spoken today, meaning technology, meaning, port competitiveness, airport competitiveness, you take all that. I mean, if this collaboration can happen only through regulatory and an inviting approach, right? And I think we should do more on that. And the Freeport example is a good example because we need to really ramp up that. And if you take like Dubai or UAE as an example, or Malaysia or Singapore as an example, in spite of the costs, the higher costs, they still seem to be enjoying this hub and the softer side of logistic benefits, attracting more and more. That's because they are open. And I think we need to look at that very deeply. And are we in a position to do that? Yes, definitely. And we as a company also, we would like to do more here. But then this is something that we need to deeply look at, and that's what I think many of us sort of emphasized here. It's you take a country like India, right? You have within India the Free Trade Warehouse Act and the process. Basically, it's ease of doing business within the country, and saying, okay, you can it's like a deemed foreign territory within the country. I think we should convert whole of Sri Lanka as a free trade warehouse zone, and then keep do that facilitation of attracting all the businesses, collaborative initiatives. Everybody is free to come. That's what Dubai is doing. That's what Singapore is doing. In a way, that's what, with all their controls, I mean, in a way, that's what Malaysia is doing. So these are neighboring environment that I'm examining. And are we able to? Can we do that? Yes, of course. Because why? Because we have the human resource, we have the geographical location. Are we a heavy, even in a way, that's what we should be doing, because we don't have a large local population to drive a different type of economy. So this is our opportunity, and I think that's where we need to move.
Thank you, Senthil. Let me ask you another question quickly on that side of it. So you have been grown from a local company to a investor-based multinational Sri Lankan company, which has brought in stars for our country. I must congratulate you on that. You said about you're not inviting, kind of get the feeling that invitation is not good enough, and the structure seems to be the invitation is not there, and that should be more out there with the global investors, both whether it is services or trade shifts. And also we know the problems we have to fix now, the LPI index, the doing business index. On the invitation side, how would you describe it to the business? I think we need to examine the reason why we are not getting there, Rohan. The question is, I would put it the other way around. Can we do what Dubai is doing? In spite of being higher cost, in spite of probably not really having the geographical advantage, or rather, we have a higher advantage compared to them because we have a gateway to Africa. We are right in the backdrop of the Indian subcontinent, access to the South China Sea. Everything is there, right? But so therefore, I think we are positioned very well, but maybe a little bit of tweaking in the regulatory aspect. Maybe, as I said, the trade regulations or the trade agreements. These are the things that influence this, also the softer side of, and we need to look at us as a value-added service hub. We need to be adding, this is what we need. And I think to that, the question we should be asking is, are we friendly towards those initiatives? And if so, if not, can we look at that? Thank you very much, Senthil. Rai, I have some questions, but I hold on to my questions. Should we go for the questions that have been asked by the viewers at this moment?
Yes, we can go ahead and do that. We have, I think, about 5 or 6 questions that have come in so far because we didn't officially open the forum to questions. We can now go ahead and do that. So audience members, you are more than welcome to go ahead and share your questions. For now, we do have a couple of questions from Aran Fernando as well as from Mr. Vasanta Dias that have come in so far. Rohan, do you want to go ahead and take them? Or
Yeah.
you...
So I will not go towards the shipwreck problem questions right now. Somebody has posed, but on the logistics side of it, I'll pose it to anybody who would like to raise the hand and answer this. Is Sri Lanka and the logistics industry open for using artificial intelligence and forecasting technologies to build secure supply chain as an edge to win more trade into Sri Lanka? Maybe I will pose this to Shehara from the maritime industry. What kind of technological advancement as a group of people that you all are working on, and not the government or the private sector, using artificial intelligence and things like that? We will leave the government out. What is the private sector initiative here?
Rohan, on this one particularly, when it comes to shipping lines and the back office processes, there is a massive process that goes into the documentation of the BLs, repetitive, and it's somewhat very human intensive. So I know that some of the industry players are now looking at automating this through artificial intelligence. Obviously they're using a system, but can we replicate the input by the human being here through the machine? Because the machine learns, okay, typing the BL number, the manifest, there's a certain order to it. So can we use a machine, and that will be much more productive than, of course, using labor? And the machine doesn't take the coffee breaks or the lunch breaks. So yes, these are the kind of things. And there are some very innovative companies in Sri Lanka who are developing softwares for this. And I know they're in trial basis at the moment. But again, these are only done by maybe a few of the larger players and not as a mass scale, because we're still a labor intensive country. And we don't want to, we're used to working with people. The shipping industry itself is very traditional, and they want human contact. They want that relationship. They want that confidence that they're dealing with a human being and not a computer. So all of this, these factors do play, but I'm not saying it's completely closed. There is some movement in that area.
Okay, thank you, Shara. Can I invite the gentleman to raise hand and think, okay, are we going on the right direction in terms of technology and artificial intelligence? Because remember one thing, we are competing to get trade, compete to get investment, competing even to get investment into the port city. So are we on the right track, as the gentleman who has asked the question? Can one of you, I will open it up, whoever who comes first to be happy to answer. I would not pose the question directly to one other. Otherwise, I will open up for somebody else, one of you.
Let me just add my 2 cents. If I look at it from the port and terminal industry, there is a fairly well-established pathway or a roadmap in terms of automation that incorporates AI technology into it, some of which is already being used. If you look at all 3 terminals in the Port of Colombo, for instance, have terminal operating systems that use predictive analysis and algorithms, AI, algorithm-based AI, to do things like their storage, the truck paths, the loading and discharge patterns, and so on. Going forward, I think we will see, we've already had people like CICT implementing OCR on the gates, that is optical character recognition, automated gates. All 3 terminals will follow suit, and certainly the new builds in the South Harbour, ECT and WCT, ECT by SLPA, WCT by the Adani JKH consortium, will have a much higher degree of automation, including cranes, ship-to-shore cranes, yard cranes, and gates in terms of a fully automated process. So there is that level of automation and usage or sort of early usage of AI within the port and terminal industry. I think if we take the warehousing, Senthil will also agree that there are the higher end of warehousing in the country today, particularly where there are GDSM and ambient warehousing, complex retail warehousing, use fairly advanced or globally used WMSs, which are all based on AI technologies and using predictive technologies. So it's not unknown, but we are still a long way from where we need to be in terms of the adaptation of sensor technologies. Sensors are much cheaper now. The use of IoT-based technology for tracking and tracing, traceability within the supply chain. If you look at companies like Maersk, they have implemented TradeLens, for instance, which gives complete supply chain visibility right through the shipment process. Now, Sri Lanka we are participating in that. So if you take SAGT as an example, or the Port of Colombo as an example, there is no black spot now, or no blind spot in that supply chain. So yes, it is, but I think it is horses for courses. So the applications must come based on pull and based on demand. I don't think someone coming and setting up a tent here saying, I've got AI, and now here it is, let's attract the global supply chains here. That alone is not going to be sufficiently a driver, because we have to bear in mind that there are no inhibitions. Unlike in a lot of other businesses, regulatory, there is no inhibition for adaptation or implementation of technology and technology-led businesses in Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Ramesh. There's a quick follow-up question that the gentleman who has asked the same question is saying, on the point of collaboration, Sri Lanka has amazing startup culture. How can startups in the technology sector work with logistics companies? Can I put this to Senthil and Siddharth to quickly give a short answer?
Yeah, Rohan, yeah, I mean, continuing from what Ramesh said, which is relevant, and to an earlier point that Siddharth mentioned about the 4 levels of hub, no environment has any restraint or inhibition in implementing their own AI tools and advancing their process of working. I mean, we do that. I'm sure Maersk does that, and Ramesh in his own environment probably they're also doing that. So, but the key is be able to integrate the entire ecosystem and benefit from that, that AI capability, and how can AI, the output of AI, be collaborative? That's something that's where we may need to look at it and see. I mean, but is Sri Lanka, is it being used in logistics? Yes, we are using it. I mean, as a logistic company, we have AI capabilities. Is Sri Lanka a good environment for startup and doing this initiative? Why not? Yes, we have abundant talent in this area, and that's happening right now. And that can be nurtured to a different level. And I'm sure Sid will have more to add to this,
Yes, Sid, I would like you to come in here with your global expertise on the, we are understanding the importance of AI.
So I think there's no two ways that organizations and as Central put it, that everyone's free to kind of do it and innovate in their own space. We have multiple tools over visibility. Ramesh spoke about TradeLens. TradeLens is getting the entire ecosystem. So we have the terminals, we have the banks, we have customs on a blockchain platform that will enable complete digital, chain of goods. So we'll have digital bills of lading, digital documents. That's something that we see Sri Lanka positioned very well to be globally for Maersk, one of the first countries to take off, because we already have the terminals on board. Asikuda, which Sri Lanka Customs is signed on for a pilot. Very soon we have some of the banks on board. So we'll have the entire ecosystem on a blockchain platform. So that will ease trade. What we also do, is a large part of our order handling process now, as I said, is based. Our pricing is based on an algorithm. She's called Penny. So we don't have any price feedback. It's based on capacity. It's like the airlines have been using for ages, right? I mean, you have an algorithm-based model that predicts and then prices accordingly. We've also set up, very interestingly, the global digital center for Maersk has been set up in Bangalore. And this actually has a group of around 300 to 400 software developers. And what they do is take industry problems and they actually give it a shot and try to solve them. And this is something that is adding great great value to some of the innovation that's coming into Maersk as well. And Bangalore being the innovation hub for India, they're trying to utilize that. So to answer the question, I think if Sri Lanka has that, and if the stakeholders get together, and there is that kind of a platform where we can talk about industry problems, and if someone is ready to startups are ready to come in and give us solutions, I'm sure everyone's willing to look at those and move that forward. So that's something that we do in India. And I'm sure that if there is an environment and there is a value for us stakeholders here, it's something that we can encourage here in Sri Lanka as well. Hasn't been done, but I think we should.
I have a continuation question from a client. He says, I think Ramesh originated this idea. We spoke of the country don't have any significant investment coming in from large multinationals, 3PL, 4PL operations. Is it to do with ownership or ease of business or low awareness about the hub capability? What is the opinion? I think you from a multinational point of view, you can answer that question, and then I'll go to Ramesh himself.
Yeah, so I think it is coming in. So if you look at it today, and I said I repeat, the first thing is a marketing that we can do hub, right? The fact that a hub adds value to a supply chain is not a secret. Customers are using hubs all over the world. They understand, they know. We need to take a conceited effort at going there and saying we are a sea air hub, we are a maritime hub, we are a vessel services hub. And that's the most critical part in my view. So that entire branding of Colombo needs to be done, and I'm sure people will come in. The second is around policy, around investment, around how do we go about it. Today we don't have a facility of hub inside the port or even adjoining the port. Today, if you want to go out to a free trade zone, you've got to spend $100 each way on transportation. It adds a lot of cost when you compare to other ports, right? So today, I'm sure any multinational logistics 3PL company would really be interested if there was an opportunity within the port that gave them the opportunity to actually have that, to have that hub. So I wouldn't say that there is a, that people are not, we will not be willing to come. I would say we need to take our product out there a lot better than we have. And I'm sure we will attract international supply chains to Sri Lanka.
Quickly, Ramesh, can you quickly give your point of view on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I agree also that it is a marketing issue, Rohan, but also it is also a matter of scale. I think we are thinking a little too small. We have to, if we even in the port, I mean, what will we do? A 200,000 square foot warehouse, what is that? That's nothing. One section of a warehouse in the Jafza, in the Jebel Ali Free Zone, is 250,000 square feet. The average, and they will have 2 parks that have 10 million square feet of warehousing. Now, if we want scale, so which comes first, the chicken or the egg, the capacity or the customer? I think I agree, you can't build blindly, but we have to be able to open ourselves also to that kind of scale. And for that, we have the advantage. If you leave the COVID pandemic situation aside, Sri Lanka is a tourism hotspot. So like our marine capacity, like our port capacity, like it grows, air capacity, belly capacity will grow because tourism will grow. And there will be carriers that will come, and with every one that adds, you have this additional capacity that keeps coming. So the propensity to become a sea air hub also grows. Now, I kind of disagree a little bit with Siddharth in terms of need to have things inside the port. We don't. We need to have, I think over the next 2 years, we will see, we already have the outer circular. over the next 2 years, we will see a point-to-point, a door-to-door connectivity between the airport and the port, and the link between the port and the airport and the outer circular. Now that opens up huge tracts of land, which is owned by the government. I mean, the government owns 85% of the land in this country. And we need policy and consistent policy that releases that. We have a bit of a phobia about land. You know, we want to keep it and own it and do nothing with it rather than have an investment on it. And the semblance of even a foreign investor in there or a foreign owner in there drives us, into hysterics. In my view, and I think the best investment that you can get anyone to make is in land, because they can't take it and go. You know, it's going to be here forever. And anything that you put on the ground, we should encourage. You know, if somebody wants to own 100% of something, let them own it. And because we already have very successful PPP models in the port, in where you give concessions for a time frame, you work with the government's contribution is the land, and we do, Port City is a prime example. The port, the concessions in the port are prime examples. So it's not unknown. It's just that we need to extend it to all these other areas if we want to put our money where our mouths are. You know, if we want to extend to be a true hub, sea, air, sea, everything, and all levels of the logistics, as Sid was saying. We need 5 EFLs here, and all 5 of them need to have 1.5 million square feet of value-added warehousing that caters to imports, exports, transshipment, mixed load, everything. And we shouldn't be looking at working this kind of cargo operation inside the port. It's far too much of a premium. The port is meant for full containers and for exchanging boxes with the ships. This is not the place to be mucking around with warehouses. And, I'm going against the grain here because there are lots of plans to do all of these things inside here, but the real estate is too valuable inside here. And these are businesses that must be pushed outside, and we must allow anyone to do it.
Okay, Ramesh, your point taken. I think we are on time. Rai, we can go for a few minutes more because I need to post the last 2 questions to Shahara and Chandana, and then finish up with Senthil. So Shahara, there is a question. Having identified the potential of Sri Lanka as a maritime hub, why the government support is still lagging to achieve it? Is it lack of expertise or mere political resistance? So I would like both Shahara and to Chandana to pose the same question. Please, we got 2 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, in short, I don't think it's a lack of government support, but I would think it's a lack of policy consistency over the years with the changing governments. We've had changes in policy when the previous Rajapaksa regime had an EOI out for the East Container Terminal, published, given out to all the large terminal operators in the world. They all submitted their bids. Next thing you know, another government comes in and that is cancelled. And 5 years of nothing. So this is a prime example of why we are not a maritime hub. And apart from that, I think it's a lot to do with the ease of doing business. Our customs ordinance coming from the 1970s, a lot of our British laws, which are still prevalent, state enterprises. When a vessel comes into the port of Colombo, the number of officers that board that vessel, the customs, the port health, the port police, the Navy, the ISPS. In Singapore, all of this is done electronically. So this is the starting point to becoming a maritime hub, is to completely make, build in IT, ease of doing business, policy consistency. And then we can talk about the rest of it. And of course, building the infrastructure. We have the required human capital. Yes, there are a lot of improvements in education system and our labor laws that need to happen. But in terms of skillful labor force, which is highly trainable. So our strategic location is there. Everything else is there. So there's nothing to say that we're lacking in that. And I think we need to separate out regulations when it comes to logistics and when it comes to maritime. We need to be careful on what is going to benefit the country in terms of FDI. When it comes to maritime services, there is no FDI involved. It is purely employment of people in the country and local expertise. So we need to separate that out from the investment in warehouses and this cargo movement, which we talked about, like Ramesh. So it's two different subjects. And yeah, I think there is a maritime policy, I think contributed by about 15 experts from the industry, written up. Unfortunately, it's a document that never really got implemented actively. Hopefully, there'll be a more focused approach going forward.
Thank you, Shara. So coming back to Chandana, the ball is in your.
Yeah, I think it's Shara. I think she mentioned everything what has to be said. Few years ago, we wanted to create a airline hub. I'm not talking about maritime, no logistics, no nothing. However, there were so many diverse opinions because of probably lack of knowledge, and the cardinal pinpointing issue was, is it the country or certain particular airline? So if we put the country first, then there is a segment who will come up with all kinds of arguments to say, yes, it is, Singapore may say it is open skies, but they have controlled open skies. So they get all the things that will suit their argument. You take Dubai. Dubai has, like many people have been doing business in Dubai. We have no restrictions in the UAE. You can come in, you can go out. When Emirates started, they gave our company a little bit of a dole and then said, this is all you get, you grow from there. So did Emirates grow UAE, or UAE supported the growth of Emirates? It's very, very synchronized answer. So we need to come up with this mindset. Even though we are talking about this high-tech sea, air, logistics, and all the high-level technology, our mindset has to be to say, can we have the open skies policy in Sri Lanka? That's something that we need to ponder. And the policy statement, you're absolutely spot on, has to be very, very, very casted there and then followed up to the T. I'm not going back. I mean, go back a few years. I mean, couple of years, if all of us will remember the airport expressway. It started, and if you remember well, it stopped. And then it was re-awarded. That is because of a lack of a kind of a global, or at least a bigger picture policy. So that is cardinal. If we have that, then all other things will fall into its place. It's a big challenge. Change the mindset and walk forward. That's my input, Rohan.
Excellent, super. So, Senthil, here is the last question. Ball can be a bouncer. Senthil, he said about the open skies policies and whether we need to go there. Is protectionism a problem in Sri Lanka as far as you see it for global positioning of Sri Lanka as a logistics hub? And should we think broader in that terms? Could you enlighten as a multinational Sri Lankan who goes and set up operations in other countries, and what kind of environment you see there? And what is your view on the word of what I mentioned? Protectionism has been spoken about very much in Sri Lanka, and what is Chandana is saying is also about something like that, making not a decision on open skies. What do you think?
Ron, all the panelists have had, I agree in one way or the other, most of the sentiments conveyed here. I will answer that point, but the key ingredients are, the key success elements are the marketing, which needs to come through, and the policy and the regulatory aspects, which are a key requirement, and the scale and the demonstrate stability and scale position, or give the confidence of scale, like Ramesh said, to the entire process. Now, coming to specifically to your question, every country has its challenge. How does Sri Lanka weigh in terms of that challenge, in terms of, should we open? I think I mentioned that, Ron, we need to be, if you want to create a collaborative environment, you have to open, right? Without that, it's very, in today's, way the commerce functions and, the way the globe is shifting and things are happening, I'm not sure. Yes, you need some level of, protectionism in terms of what is really core to you in some areas where priorities maybe can be looked at, but we definitely need to be open and, open to investments, open to inviting, all these collaborators that would be necessary. So some sort of a stable guiding, vision or principles that encompasses all this is what would, I think, would take us where we need to go or capitalize on this trade shift. You're muted, Rohan.
So what is your view on the open skies, what Chandana mentioned? I
think open is, Chandana, I'm also not qualified. I'm not too sure, but many countries have open sky. I mean, like not all, but on cargo, many countries have open sky policy, right? I think I'm not too sure about this regulation. To my knowledge,
skies for cargo as well. I mean, we have no restrictions on cargo.
Cargo, right?
It's only passenger.
Yeah, it's only passenger. So cargo, I mean, I'm not too familiar with the passenger aspects, Rohan, but cargo, most of the countries are, they're open. It's just like countries like China and Vietnam. It's just the slot, positioning and slot clearances that you need to work on sometimes due to congestion and so on. That takes a bit of time. But by and large, for cargo, we are open. We have no problem there. I can bring in you can bring in a freighter anytime.
Okay, thank you. I think I have gone 8 minutes past the schedule, right? So I think it's time for us to wind up today. There are other questions I had prepared, but all we have managed the time and gone. So maybe the next time, right? Logistics, are we ready too?
Absolutely.
I think, first of all, let me thank Shahara and the 4 gentlemen, Romesh, Senthil, Siddharth, and Chandana, for coming on board and giving some very professional answers. And I think the people would read to themselves, okay, we understand, yes, trade shift is true, it's going to happen, it can take time with COVID, but it's definitely going to happen. We have a new world order coming with COVID on supply chains. This is what I gathered. Sri Lanka has certain challenges, but Sri Lanka has similar opportunities. And if we work together, put our heads together and unite in one direction rather than working in isolation for our own businesses, then the country can convert into a hub, a logistics hub. And of course, logistics will play an absolute key role in one element of bringing in the trade shifts that global manufacturers and retailers would want, because we always talk about speed to market and modern consumer with e-commerce. So all that combined together, I think we have given a good platform for the listeners today. And thank you very, very much again for all of you, and to the AmCham for asking me to moderate this session. I would once again hand over the proceedings to you, Rai. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rohan, and of course, thank you to all our panelists. Well, there you go, geographic advantage, rich human capital with an ability to cater to high-end knowledge services, high-tech manufacturing, lead time on delivery, production capabilities and resources, a definite means to attract business moving or diversifying into the region. If, let's say that said, we can blow the lid on this secret of ours. Thank you to our distinguished panelists for your insights and expertise shared this evening, and Rohan for your expert moderation. To all our participants on Zoom and our viewers on YouTube and Facebook, thank you for your participation. A reminder, as always, to subscribe, click the alert button, and of course, share the YouTube videos, which is what will assist us to continue bringing AmCham's diverse, immediately impactful online resources to you free of charge. As we conclude, a reminder from our panelists, the AmCham team, and myself. Let's keep our physical distance, masks on, hands sanitized, immunity boosted, fingers crossed, and spirits up. Stay safe. Good night and God bless everybody.